Alright, let's have a little bit of fun with events in Megacorp. Now for starters, events in this game are always instant speed. That means they can be played anytime, even on your opponent's turn, even at any phase of your own turn as well. So let's demonstrate this basically by playing a relatively powerful card called Rampant Bribery. Now, this card has a valuation of 1 million with 1 EQ trade cost, and to play this card, all I need to do basically is to generate 2 EQ over here. Let's put 2 EQ down, and of course I'm going to spend 1 million. So we're going to spend 1 million and pay for that 1 EQ. So what happens is that it deals 1 MQ damage to any target card. If it dies, return Rampant Bribery to the owner's hand. In this case, let's assume that the character did not die. Now, I could actually attack my own card during the combat step using MQ with the Glass Man, 3 MQ versus 2 MQ here, destroying Rampant Bribery, placing it in my open market pile, and then I could essentially play it again by paying 1 more EQ and paying 1 more million. And I can put it back into play. Now bear in mind that events can be used for a variety of things. For example, subsequently I can still engage this card to produce 2 MQ, or I could even use this as a blocker as well. So events can form the backbone basically of some of your best surprise techniques when playing Megacorp. Now remember, at the end of every turn, you need to discard all your event cards. Now there is a kind of event card that actually stays in play, and that of course is a permanent event card. Now this particular card is relatively powerful. It's political corruption. It costs a fair bit, and it's a permanent moral assault event. Now this will actually stay in play rather than be discarded at the end of the turn. So basically it violates the rules that events have to be discarded at the end of the turn. Now this one is loyal. That means it cannot be bought, can't be sold by its controller. Disruptor, which is a very dangerous ability. Any point of damage dealt by a card with Disruptor to a business, the owner of that business has to pay 1 million credits. And of course, it has the unethical keyword. Now this doesn't actually represent an ability. We actually added that in the next set of cards. This will become way more relevant because the next set is all about crime and justice. So let's say my opponent plays political corruption on my network. Okay? Now this card says that every player's A phase, all adjacent cards are dealt 2 MQ damage. Now let's just allow this to resolve. Now this doesn't just mean my A phase, it means my opponent's A phase as well. If you're playing with more than 2 players, basically, it triggers at every single player's A step. That means right now, the following players know when I end my turn, this is going to do 2 MQ damage to this card, which dies, and then kills 2 MQ damage to this card. Now, what you notice here is that 2 cards have actually perished at the same time. Now, if you are the controller of the cards that have been destroyed, you get to choose the order in which they enter the open market. Now, this gives you a limited defense against your opponent if he were to buy your assets. Now, of course, at the end of the turn, political corruption becomes orphaned, and it too gets discarded. And of course, when you discard a card in your opponent's network, it goes back to its owner's open market. So what if hypothetically my opponent is able to deploy political corruption again on my network? Now what will happen is that the Disruptor ability is really going to hurt me. For starters, it's going to do 2 MQ damage at the end of his turn, because during my A phase, it's going to hit selfish consumers with 2 MQ. And then it hits the business with 2 MQ damage. Now what happens here is, because it has the Disruptor ability, I have to lose 2 million credits. And of course, if I don't have enough credits by the end of the turn to make it a positive balance, I lose the game. Now, supposing I do not want to lose that 2 million credits, let's roll me back to 8 million. Let's just say that he played this card, Political Corruption, and it hasn't transited to my turn yet. That means it's not even my A phase yet. I could theoretically try to defend myself by playing a card to destroy Political Corruption. But in this case, you know, I can't really do anything. My founder is engaged and I don't have any other cards to produce trade. So let's just walk through this turn again. Let's say that I get hit with the 2 million. I disengage because I got no cash flow, I got no upkeep. I invert, draw a card. Now, let's just say that I want to actually hit back political corruption. So what if I were to invert my business to produce EQ. So I have 10 EQ. And I were to invert basically the glass man to produce 3 MQ. Now what will happen here is that I could play this powerful card called Kickback, spend 1 million, spend 1 EQ, spend 1 MQ. As you can see that this particular card takes 2 different kinds of trade to play. So it's a little bit more difficult to deploy. This card deals 3 MQ damage to political corruption, and this gets discarded. So, in theory, because political corruption is now on the top of my opponent's open market pile, I can essentially play my opponent's card and hit him immediately with it. What happens if 2 players basically want to buy the top card of an open market pile at the same time, and that card happens to be an event? As you know, events can be played anytime. So when 2 players want to buy at the same time, what happens? Who goes first? Who has priority? This is really simple. What you need to do is to have both players basically put a bid as 1 dice each. So let's say I want to bid 1 million and my opponent wants to bid, say, 4 million. Now the amount of money paid must be equal to or greater than the valuation of the card being bid for. That means they must still be able to pay the trade cost as well. Otherwise the bid is invalid. Both players reveal their bids, and the player with the higher bid gets to play the card. The player that actually bid the lower amount doesn't actually have to spend any money. That means only the player with the high bid loses money as a result of deploying the card at the top of the open market pile. Now, one very useful and dynamic application of events is to save your cards from being orphaned, even your business. Supposing this corp citizen is destroyed in combat and is discarded to the top of my open market pile. This leaves this corp citizen basically orphaned. And at the end of the turn, if nothing is placed in this slot, this corp citizen is going to be discarded because it is orphaned, otherwise illegally docked. Now I could actually play a rampant bribery just to bridge the gap. However, as you know, rampant bribery is an event and will also be discarded at the end of the turn. However, it does save the corp citizen from being orphaned. In the subsequent turn, which is my opponent's turn, I would need to play another event again to bridge this gap. I can do it with the same card, assuming that nobody destroys any more cards that blocks my rampant bribery from being on the top of the open market.